Hey everybody, what's going on? Hexlex here. We got another Master Duel video for you all. So today we're going to be covering a deck new to the channel. I've not ever covered this one before. We're going to be playing Madolche. Madolche is, for those who aren't familiar with them, an Earth Fairy archetype based off of all kinds of tasty treats. And in addition to that, they have a lot of swarming and also disruptive potential as well. Their main deck monsters are all, again, Earth monsters. Most of them are fairies. We do have the two Messangelato that are going to be warriors, but they all have some kind of summoning effect. We have Anjelly basically acting as a kind of lone fire blossom, able to tribute itself in order to special summon a Madolche from the deck. Petingcessour, when special summoned, which you can do from your hand if you do not have any cards in your graveyard, or any monsters rather, you can special summon her, and when she's special summoned, you get to special a Madolche monster from your deck and then reduce its level by 1. This makes the level 5 Puddingcess a level 4 monster. Doesn't have any inherent ability to summon itself, but basically the combo from there is to go into Glassouffle, activate her effect, then go into Chocolat-a-la-Mode. Chocolat-a-la-Mode, while you have Puddingcess attached as an Xyz material, this will allow you to special summon Madolche monster for your deck by detaching material when Madolche cards get shuffled into your main deck from the graveyard, which a lot of the Madolche cards inherently do. Another Madolche that we're playing that's actually not a fairy either is going to be the level 3 beast Hootcake. Hootcake is another way to get our plays going and is part of our combo, allowing us to banish a monster from our graveyard in order to special summon Madolches from the deck. So, as you can see, the Madolches have a lot of ability to, like I said, swarm and then special summon. Their disruption comes in the form of Queen Tiaramisu, which can shuffle back Madolche monsters from your graveyard into your deck, and then shuffle cards your opponent controls up to the number of Madolche cards returned. This isn't necessarily part of your main turn 1 combos, but is often useful when going second in order to disrupt your opponent's board. And because it shuffles them back into the deck, it's able to play around a lot of very common effects that will trigger when monsters are often removed, including, of course, the tier limits. As far as the last Madolche monster that I touched on earlier, Messangelato, when this one is special summoned, it gets to add any of your Madolche spell or trap cards from your deck to your hand, all of which are actually very powerful in their own right. Promenade has the ability to negate any face-up card your opponent controls. This can even include a normal spell or trap card that is currently resolving. And to do so, you simply return a Madolche monster you control, or even in your graveyard to your hand. So it can be a twofold kind of effect that way, where you not only get to return a Madolche card from graveyard to hand, but you even get to negate a card in the process of doing so. The field spell Chateau says that any Madolche monster that would get shuffled back into the main deck instead gets added to our hand. Some obvious good synergy there. And then we have the Salon is going to be the other one that's part of our main combo. This is what lets you set up the Promenade from the deck. Salon, when your Madolche cards either return from the graveyard to the hand or the deck, lets you set a Madolche spell or trap card directly from your deck. Again, that's most often going to be the Promenade here. It also gives you an additional normal summon for a Madolche monster, which can come up sometimes. Ticket is not really part of our main combos, but it's still a great Madolche card to have around. It's another continuous spell card, and when your Madolche cards get returned to the main deck from your hand or returned to your hand or main deck from the graveyard, then this card will allow you to add a Madolche monster from your deck to your hand. And if you have a fairy Madolche monster on the field, you get to special summon instead of just adding it, which of course, as we covered, the only non-fairy Madolches are Hootcake and Messangelato. Anjelly, Petingcessour, Puddingcess, Tiaramisu, Glassouffle, Chocolat-a-la-Mode, as you can see, they are all going to be fairies. And since this archetype has so many Earth fairies, the Vernusylphs make a very natural fit into the deck here. We're playing 3 Vernusylph of the Flourishing Hills, only 1 of the Awakening Forest, because we don't really need to send that many Madolche cards directly from our deck to the graveyard in order to get our plays going. We do have 3 Misting Seedlings, though. This one actually ends up being particularly good in this deck because this allows you to add any Earth Fairy from your deck to your hand, unlike Flourishing Hills, which just lets you add a Vernusylph card. Of course, because Misting Seedling allows you to add an Earth Fairy, that will in turn allow you to add some of your Madolche cards in order to get your play started, most often Anjelly. Another nice benefit to being Earth Fairies is that we get to play some of the Ishizu cards as well. We're only playing the Shufflers here, but I am playing the max allowed of each. I have 2 Keldo and 3 Mudora. This will allow us to get a little bit of extra level 4 bodies on board. We do have a decent amount of rank 4s we can go into. But more than that, the Shufflers make for great disruption in this meta. As I'm sure you're well aware, they are very good against the tier limit cards, and this is actually one of the reasons why Madolche is so particularly good against tier limits, is because how easily you can slide in Keldo and Mudora. Glassouffle actually also has some similar built-in synergy to that. If a Madolche card is sent to your graveyard while this card is on the field, you can shuffle up to 2 cards from the graveyard into the deck. So with some good timing, you can, let's say your opponent is going to, you know, normal summon the Rhinoheart, for example. Then you can, in response to the Rhinoheart's effect, detach a material from Glassouffle per her quick effect. This will make her unaffected by monster effects, but moreover, this will send a Madolche card to the graveyard. On the next chain link, whatever tier limit monster your opponent sent with Rhinoheart will be prompted to activate. Then you'll also be prompted to activate the Glassouffle effect. That will allow you to shuffle back the tier limit monster that's trying to proc in your opponent's graveyard. This is one of the major reasons why a lot of people you may have been, you know, heard saying, including myself, that Madolche is a great inherent counter to tier limits. This is one of the reasons, is that you know, the inherent combo of the deck ends you on a monster that can disrupt cards from the graveyard. It'll also end you on the Promenade, which has the ability to negate any card on the field. So a lot of good disruption again from your inherent turn 1 play, compounded with the fact that you're also playing the Shufflers, and it's very easy to get one into the graveyard thanks to the fact that you're also playing the Vernusylphs here. This is why I do have the 1 Awakening Forest to potentially send a Shuffler to the yard if need be. Meaning that because we're playing fairies, this also means that we get to play our one of Herald of the Orange Light as well. I don't like it in tier limit as much because we're not playing nearly as many fairies. We're only playing the Ishizu cards, but here, obviously, we have a ton of fairy monsters, and we also recycle Madolche cards back to our hand as part of our inherent combo. So Herald of Orange Light becomes much better in a build like this. Beyond that, in the main deck, we just have some pretty standard staple cards. We have 3 Maxx, 3 Ash Blossom, 3 Imperm, 2 Callby, and a Crossout Designator. Crossout Designator might seem a little bit odd, but this is mostly just here to combat Maxx, as of course the Callbys and the Ash Blossoms are. Callby is great in any deck that isn't tier limit against tier limit. Callby is still okay in tier limit for the mirror, but as I've discussed on the channel before, I don't particularly like it because you can often end up shutting off your own names inadvertently for longer than you would like to stop your opponent's plays. But here, obviously, it's just great. We love using this on tier limit fusers, and the Ash Blossom, again, is mostly here for Maxx. Maxx is still very common in the meta and is very, very good against this deck as well. And it's mainly for that reason that I have, again, the Crossout and the Ash Blossoms, is to mainly counteract the Maxx, because this is unfortunately one of those decks where if your opponent just fires off Maxx right at the beginning of your play, you're probably just going to have to end with whatever monster you normal summon, to be an Anjelly, or if you just special Petingcessour, you're just going to have to end on that, and it's, you know, obviously feels very bad. As far as the extra deck goes, 3 Glassouffle might seem like a lot, and indeed I did have to spend quite a few dust, quite a bit of it rather, in order to craft out this deck, but I really do like having a full playset of the Glassouffle. I think it's less important, honestly, now that we have the Shufflers, but your main combo, like your main turn 1 play, will summon 2 of these. So in a grindier game, it can very easily come to a point where you need another copy, and that's why I like having the 3rd in the extra deck. Again, we can also use the Shufflers to put back copies in our extra deck, but from our graveyard rather to our extra deck, but I'd rather not have to rely on that every single time. The reason that you would have 3 of those as well as 2 of each Chocolat-a-la-Mode and Tiaramisu is that Petingcessour, and I believe maybe some of the other Madolches, but I know for sure Petingcessour is going to lock you into only being able to special summon Madolches for the entire turn. Doesn't look like that's actually the case for Anjelly. You'd think I would have read this, honestly. Nor is it really the case for Hootcake. But honestly, a Petingcessour, you will use this card in, like, very much, like, every single one of your combos. So, for a lot of the combos, you're going to end up, like I said, locked into only being able to special summon Madolche monsters for the turn. So that's one of the reasons why we have so many Madolche monsters in our extra deck. If you wanted to go like bare bones, only stuff you absolutely needed, you could theoretically get away with 2 Glassouffle, 1 Chocolat-a-la-Mode, and then 1 Tiaramisu. But again, you will find that you will struggle in grindier games in that case, because your main combo will use up both your Glassouffles and your Chocolat-a-la-Mode. So you're already like pretty much out of Madolche monsters to summon. And in the future, like in future turns after the first, if you need to make a play with Petingcessour, you're only going to have the one Tiaramisu that you're able to summon. So again, it seems a little bit redundant to have so many, especially because they're all URs, so many of the Madolche extra monsters in our extra deck, but it does end up being pretty important for the deck's overall play style. Further, in addition to that, we have Abyss Dweller. It's just obviously I've said it many times, still is true. In this meta, any deck that can make this should be playing it. Bagooska is another great stall option. This is also Earth. Remember, the Vernusylph cards are going to lock us into only being able to special summon, or not special summon, but rather only be able to activate the effects of Earth monsters for the entire turn. So any Earth monsters that are good for the extra deck are going to be especially good here in Madolche's. And Bagooska is great if you end up on a not super, playable hand. You can just like wait on it and just kind of stall out until you can draw something. We also, of course, have Zeus. This is an Earth, but it's still good in literally any Xyz based deck. Our last non-Earth card in the extra deck is going to be the Underworld Goddess of the Closed World. This is just good because even though we don't have like IP Masquerena, this deck makes very swarmy boards, so it's a nice towers out that we can actually go into relatively easily the quote-unquote honest way and not doing it again with IP during our opponent's turn. For the rest of our Link suite, we do have a couple more to Madolche monsters, the Fresh Sistart. This is honestly one of the weaker Link 2s, as far as like, a lot of archetypes tend to get really powerful Link 2s, but this is one of the weaker ones. It basically just protects your Madolche spell and trap cards while it's pointing to a Madolche monster, and then if this card in particular will be destroyed, you can shuffle a Madolche monster from your grave back into the deck instead. It's really mostly here to send Madolche monsters to the graveyard to trigger the effect of Glassouffle to shuffle cards back into the deck. That's by linking into Fresh Sistart, we're able to do that proactively during our turn. Our other Link monsters are going to be Knightmare Cerberus and Aussa, both Earth, so we can play them under Vernusylphs. Aussa, there's a lot of Earth monsters being played in general, the AA-ZEUS, so this can come up sometimes to force like a Shuffler if you need to for some reason, or just being able to steal Earth monsters in general. And the Knightmare Cerberus is some nice main monster zone removal that we can summon under the Vernusylphs. So that's pretty much the whole list. Normally I do like to go through and list out each individual card, but I've already honestly pretty much done that. So now that I've broken down the deck and how all the cards work, let's look at some gameplay here. Alright, so our first duel here is going to be against Tearlaments. Like I've said before in the profile, Madolche is a very nice natural counter to Tearlaments due to how a lot of their effects line up against the Tearlament cards. So we're going to be taking the second turn here, but we did actually get pretty lucky. Our opponent got a little more than a little bit, honestly, bricked up, setting only one card before passing. To be fair, we did have Imperm, so even if they had summoned a Kit Close, we could have Impermed it, and that would have likely stopped a lot of their plays anyway. So I'm going to special the Petingcessour and activate her effect. This will allow my opponent to trigger a Havness from their hand. It doesn't look like they milled anything relevant though. They will get to search a trap card with Scream, but that doesn't really do much here. I'll use the Petingcessour to special the Puddingcess for my deck, making her level 4. Now I get to go into a Madolche Teacher Glassouffle. I'll use her effect, detaching specifically Petingcessour, and I do want to make sure that I'm detaching specifically that one, because Chocolat-a-la-Mode does need the Puddingcess to be attached as a material to get these summon effects. So I'm going to try to activate the Chocolat-a-la-Mode effect. I think that is actually the correct pronunciation, because it's either Italian or French. I think French, but the Silic is going to stop that. Thankfully, our opponent did not have a tier limit monster in their hand, it seems, because even though they sent the Havness, they weren't able to fuse there. So from there, we normal summon Anjelly and activate the effect. Opponent's got an Ash Blossom, so that's going to stop that part of the combo. And I'm not really able to do a whole lot else here. Because I activating Petingcessour's effect, I can only special Madolche's, so I can't activate Keldo or Mudora. I'm going to set both my Imperms in pass, sneakily, quote-unquote, however sneakily you can do this, placing one of them in the same column as the Celiac. So, opponent's going to activate Keldo, discarding Mudora to add another Mudora, and then normal summoning said Mudora. overlaying into a rank 4, it's going to end up being the Bagooska here. Looks like my opponent's trying to stall out until they can draw some more relevant cards, but as we already know, I have double Imperm down, so this isn't going to really do too much here. I do actually want to specifically use the Imperm that's not pointing to Solic in order to negate the Bagooska, so that way I can save the Solic negation for a future turn if need be. I'm going to start by using my Vernusylph of the Flourishing Hills in order to put a Mudora in the yard. This is fine. The fact that my opponent chained Mudora, I don't really care about that. I'll use the Mudora that we're going to put back in response, but yeah, it doesn't really affect my plays here because I still have the... Basically, I just needed to get the missing Seedlings, and I can still special summon the Flourishing Hills here. Now I'll use Missing Seedlings, sending the Keldo in order to grab an Anjelly. I'll special the Keldo to the field because why not? There's literally no reason not to. Now I'm going to use Anjelly to go into the Hootcake, using that to special summon the Messangelato, and then my opponent's going to concede at this point. Note that specifically I didn't go for the Petingcessour at any point because that would leave me only able to special summon Madolche monsters for the rest of the turn, but with this setup I can go into potentially Abyss Dweller or just some other extra deck monsters if need be. But likely what I was going to go for here was the Abyss Dweller, like I said, just to make sure that my opponent wasn't able to do anything in future turns. The Keldo would have helped with that as well. But yeah, that's a pretty nice game against Tier Limits. Again, they did get a pretty poor opening, but it's a nice way of showing how Madolches can kind of like avalanche card advantage into a point where the opponent is not really able to deal with it. So we of course have more games. Let's go ahead and take a look at the next one here. Alright, we have yet another duel against Tier Limits here. I'm trying to remember if I go first in this one or not. We will show a game that just has a standard going first combo, but no, okay, that's what I thought. I actually do end up going second yet again here. This going second hand, however, is fantastic. We have Maxx and Ash Blossom, so I definitely cannot complain. Opponent's going to try to start with the Terraforming. Of course, we all know what planet that's going to search for, the Pearl-Reno, but the Ash Blossom is going to stop that pretty handily here. Opponent has a triple attack, and I was really anxious until I saw my opponent draw 2 cards rather than rip a card from my hand. Now, here, my opponent hasn't yet committed a normal summon, so you could make an argument that maybe draw 2 is right to try to find Rhino Heart here, but do know my hand, right? If my opponent had chosen to look at my hand and put back the Anjelly, I would not have been left with very many plays whatsoever. So I think that draw 2 is almost never the right option. On turn 1, I think it's almost always better to rip a card out of the opponent's hand, and going second, I think it's almost always better to take control of an opponent's card. Of course, there are situations where that isn't true. I don't think this is one of them, though. Granted, I do have the knowledge of, you know, my own hand to be able to make that claim, which my opponent does not. But I think drawing 2, generally speaking, was a little greedy here. I think you have a greater chance of shutting down the opponent's plays by putting back a card than enabling your own by drawing 2 in most circumstances. Just wanted to quickly throw in my 2 cents about that triple tech activation there. But in any case, my opponent's going to normal summon a Mudora, activate a Scream, set a card, and then pass. So it doesn't look like they end up drawing anything particularly useful there. Draw for turn, we get a Mudora here. Gonna start by normal summoning my Anjelly. I get to sack her off. My opponent's got a Maxx, but thankfully I actually opened 2 Ash Blossoms, so I get to go ahead and turn off my opponent's Maxx. Alright, now Anjelly is going to resolve, allowing me to special summon the Petingcessour, and then my opponent's going to concede, as they know that's the beginning of my combo. But what exactly does a turn 1 combo like this look like? Let's go ahead and show off a duel where we actually show off what a full turn 1 play ends up looking like. So this game is actually going to be against Sky Strikers. That's a name we haven't seen in quite a while, and it's definitely not one that I see very frequently, but this duel is going to be one where we go first, and here I'll show you what a pretty typical turn 1 combo for Madolche looks like. So here, as we see in our opening hand, we have Petingcessour. That's all we need. Even if we have the Puddingcess in our hand, Petingcessour can summon from hand anyway. So we have the Petingcessour. That's all we need. It's a 1-card combo to go off. You could also open Anjelly for the Petingcessour, and if you're playing Magellan, that's another 1-card combo. You can open just the Magellan in order to get your plays kicked off. I'm not playing Magellan in this build, but it's definitely not a bad card. In any case, I'm going to lead off with my Petingcessour, because I have no monsters in my graveyard. I'll special summon her. That'll allow me to special summon the Puddingcess from hand or deck as a level 4 monster. Now we're going to overlay the two of them to go into the Madolche Teacher Glassouffle. We're going to use Glassouffle's effect, detaching exactly Petingcessour in order to make her immune to monsters. My opponent actually had an Imperm and used it here. This is the actual worst time for my opponent to use Imperm. This effect did not need to resolve. We just needed to detach the Petingcessour. And again, we wanted to detach exactly Petingcessour, making sure that Chocolat-a-la-Mode is going to have the Puddingcess as a material underneath. Now we can activate Chocolat-a-la-Mode's effect, putting the Petingcessour back into our deck. Because Puddingcess is a material, we can detach the Glassouffle to special summon Anjelly from our deck. Now Anjelly will attribute herself to special summon the Hootcake. Hootcake can banish the Glassouffle in our graveyard to special summon Messangelato. Messangelato, when special summoned, adds the field spell Chateau. Now we activate Chateau, that's going to put the Anjelly in our yard back into our deck, triggering Chocolat-a-la-Mode, detaching Puddingcess, summoning another Messangelato to add another spell, the Salon. Messangelato's Surge is not once per turn. We activate Salon here before overlaying exactly our two Messangelato into yet another Glassouffle. Now we're going to link our Hootcake and our Chocolat-a-la-Mode into fresh Sistart. That will send a Madolche from our field to the graveyard, triggering Glassouffle's second effect. Now, normally the Puddingcess and the Hootcake will get shuffled back into our deck, but because we have Chateau, they actually get added back to our hand instead. A nice little bit of advantage. Now Salon will trigger, allowing us to set the Promenade from our deck. Here, as a bit of a bonus, I get to throw on this Misting Seedlings. This is not part of the standard combo. The standard combo adds everything to this board state except the Chocolat-a-la-Mode. But because I had the Vernusylph of Misting Seedlings, I get to discard the Misting Seedlings along with Hootcake in order to... I'm going to add Awakening Forest to set up a Mudora in my graveyard in case I'm playing against tier limits. We know, of course, now it's Sky Striker, but the Shuffler is actually pretty good against that as well. And then because we use some Vernusylphs, we get to summon out some more Madolche monsters to our field. So that's a pretty typical turn 1 end board. Our opponent's going to upstart into Reinforcement, and then, of course, that's going to get them the Ray, revealing that they are on Sky Striker. Now they get to activate the Continuous spell before using the effect to sack off Ray. Now at this point, I'm going to activate the Maxx in response to Ray's effect. Didn't do it when they summoned Ray because, of course, they could just chain Ray and that would deny me a draw. Here, I am guaranteed the draw off the Hayate that is being summoned. Opponent's going to move to battle phase, try to attack me directly. I'm going to use my Promenade to negate the Hayate and try to return the Puddingcess from my grave to my hand. But the opponent has a Mobilize Engage that will allow them to pivot from Hayate into Kagari, and I don't get to add the Puddingcess back because I didn't negate a card. Kagari is going to try to add back this Engage, but because a Madolche card, the Promenade, left the field this turn, I get to activate Glassouffle. That'll shuffle back not only the Engage Kagari is trying to add, but the Ray in my opponent's graveyard as well. Opponent's going to then attack my Hootcake, but that just triggers the Hootcake effect to normally be shuffled back into the deck, but because of Chateau, add to my hand, and then Salon will let me search and set the Ticket. At this point, my opponent just concedes. As you can see, I have an overwhelming amount of card advantage here, and I have a lot of stuff to go into on my next turn. Would not be hard, I think, to find enough damage to battle over the Kagari and then attack for game. Wouldn't even need to battle over it. I could just go into Tiaramisu very easily and then shuffle it back into the deck. So that's a very ideal and standard turn 1 game for Madolche. It's what it looks like there. As you can see, the deck puts up lots of advantage, lots of disruption, particularly against the graveyard, which again makes this a natural counter to tier limits. We do have one more duel to show off. Let's go straight into it. Alright, our last duel for this video is going to be against Ancient Warriors, which I've actually been seeing a decent amount of on ladder. Not like a lot, but I think they're another deck that people have kind of turned to as a budget option to sort of counter the tier limits, so to speak. But in any case, we're going to take the first turn once again here, and once again we opened with Petingcessour, so this is another chance to show off our turn 1 combo line. Going into the Glassouffle. Again, if you don't open Petingcessour, you can start with Anjelly for Petingcessour, and then when you would special summon the Anjelly from your deck off of Chocolat-a-la-Mode, you can just go straight for the Hootcake because you already have the Anjelly set up in your graveyard. It is actually important that you are specifically banishing and shuffling back and detaching the exact cards that I have been here in the combo, like that we're banishing exactly the Glassouffle from the graveyard, because we need to be able to shuffle back the Anjelly with the Chateau, and that will trigger Chocolat-a-la-Mode to summon another card. So yeah, do take particular note of what is being detached and what is not, because again, that is actually extremely important for the combo here. But as you can see, we have the same setup as last time. We are going to end up the Glassouffle and then link it to the Sistart. It's important you activate Salon, then go into Glassouffle, then Sistart in that order, so that way you get to trigger both the Glassouffle effect and then the Salon effect to set the Promenade as well. And then, yeah, I mean, that only used up one card in our hand, so we definitely have some more cards we can do some shenanigans with here, some plays. I get to set up a Mudora and a Keldo in my yard due to the Vernusylph cards that I've added here. And I even get to, as a bonus, bring back a Chocolat-a-la-Mode with 3,000 attack points. No special summon now for that other Vernusylph because I did not have a Madolche monster in my yard to summon, but as I said, we actually got to set up the Mudora and the Keldo. So here I actually chained Promenade to the Feather Duster. This was actually a misplay. I totally forgot about Fresh Sistart's first effect, which would have protected my Chateau and Salon anyways, so there was no need to do that. But the opponent actually ended up chaining Droplet, and I thought they were going to negate my Sistart in order to, you know, stop my, rather get rid of my back rows, my Chateau and Salon. But they actually end up negating Chocolat-a-la-Mode. So it actually kind of worked out here. I like forced a Droplet by chaining the Promenade here, because I guess my opponent didn't read Sistart either, so mutual not reading of effects resulted in the best scenario for me anyway. My opponent gets to special summon the, I've used this in our event. What is this card called again? It's the Loyal Guanyan. I'm absolutely sure I mispronounced that. I'm 100% sure I did, but they get to use that, and then another Ancient Warrior to try to search a card. I Ash Blossom it. Monster Reborn doesn't do anything here because I have a Shuffler. And yeah, even though my opponent does get to battle over my cards, I get to reset my Promenade that I put back with my Shuffler, thanks to the Salon there. And then yeah, my opponent just concedes because at that point they realize, oh, they only have one card left as compared to my very, very much fleshed out board and hand. So there you have it. There are some games with Madolches. I hope you all enjoyed those, and I hope you learned something from them about a new archetype that is also, again, a very good counter to Tiers. It is, again, unfortunately, a bit of an expensive one due to how many extra URs you end up needing for the deck, but if you do have the extra materials, or if you have the gems to pull from their secret pack, then they are definitely not a bad investment. But that's going to go ahead and do it for our games. Now let's move on to the outro. Alright everybody, thank you so much for watching all the way to the very end of the video like this. That means a whole lot to me. Not just personally, but it's also a great way of supporting the channel as well. If you're interested in supporting the channel in other means, you can of course feel free to comment and or subscribe right here on YouTube. I'm always looking to the comments section. You guys leave some pretty awesome feedback as far as like constructive criticism goes when it comes to deck building, gameplay, channel content, all that stuff. So feel free to leave your opinion down there. I will be sure to take a look at that there. And then subscribing is going to be the best way to get notifications of when these videos drop. That does happen every day, by the way, so if you're looking for daily Master Duel content, you've come to the right place. And there are more places where you can get some daily Master Duel content. If you check out the description below, follow the top link over to my Patreon page. There for just $5 a month, which is as much as you pay for a booster pack. You'll find a lot more value than a pack full of filler over there. We've got some previews for content upcoming here on the channel. We've got some exclusive games that are only posted over on Patreon over there. We've got some Q&As, and then you can also have your name featured in this lovely credit sequence where I thank all of the people who are helping contribute over there on Patreon. It's a huge support to the channel, and it really means a lot as well. So thank you everyone who is donating. that is featured here on screen. And again, you know, it's not just a pure donation, you do get some more daily Master Duel content over there just for being a part of the Patreon. But I think that's about all the time that I have for today's video. Once again, I just want to thank you so very much for sticking all the way to the end of the video. Again, it just means a lot, as I do put a decent amount of work into getting these videos out every single day. But that's about all the time that I've got for now, so without further ado, this is Xlex. I'm signing out, and I hope you have a fantastic day.